This is Pastor Arik, and you're listening to The Clergy Corner. Welcome to episode 294 of the special podcast about life and faith. I'm your host, Eric Borstad, the pastor of Ankeny United Church of Christ in Ankeny, Iowa. And it is my hope that this will be a time of reflection, healing, and wholeness for you. Welcome back, everyone, and my sincerest apologies that I've been away from your podcast feeds for the past couple of weeks. There's been a lot going on, to be perfectly honest. My wife left town to go to Arizona to lead a retreat, so I had to take care of both boys. My mom had a total knee replacement surgery over the weekend. Couple that with having to work and getting things ready for our trunk or treat, and it was fair to say that I had quite a bit on my plate recently, which actually brings me to what I want to talk about this week. You see, there's that age-old adage that tells us it takes a village. And of course, that refers back to when it would take a village to raise the children that grew up in a community. I think the whole phrase is, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Most scholars believe that the phrase likely originated as an African proverb, but there's also some evidence that may suggest it might have been some indigenous Americans as well. Regardless, the fact that it shows up in multiple cultures, the fact that it is a universal sort of adage, I think shows us that there is some substance to this. We recognize that it takes a community of people to come together for the greater good. From raising children in the community to helping one another out in times of difficulty or strife. One of the reasons that we as human beings developed societies, right? Developed groups and communities was for a support system, to be there for one another in the midst of the difficulties of life. And over the past few years, I've heard some lamenting, and rightfully so, that it seems like we have lost a sense of community in our world. Certainly, COVID-19 and its forced isolation took a significant toll on us, and we struggled to find a sense of belonging, a sense of community in the midst of sort of our forced distance. But even since then, right, even post-lockdown, we have fought to find a way to make a connection with one another, to find that proverbial village that we might have been missing in our lives. Which brings me back to this past week of my life, right? This past week, I feel like I personally have experienced the health and vivacity of the village firsthand. And it gave me hope and strength in not only our future, but in the bonds that we share. So as I mentioned, right, my wife led a retreat down in Arizona. She was gone for 5 days. And in the midst of trying to get things ready for the weekend, I found myself struggling to balance both work and taking care of the boys. And it just so happens, right, with the timing of everything, the boys had a 4-day weekend. They didn't have school on Friday or on Monday. And so it was just me and them. And I struggled, right? I wondered how I was going to be able to manage my time with so much going on. Then, miraculously, in stepped Sage's best friend's mom. He was on a soccer team with this best friend of his, and his mom stepped in and said, you know what, why don't we have Sage over essentially all day Friday while the boys are home from school? So I dropped him off in the morning, and I picked him up pretty close to his bedtime. And because of that, I was so much more easily able to divide my time between giving my attention and taking care of one child, Leo, while also managing to get some work done and preparations done for a busy weekend. In that moment, right, I was reminded it really does take a village. Then there was my mom's surgery that took place on Friday as well. A dear friend of theirs dropped her and my dad off at the hospital, and my sister and her family looked after my dad overnight, and we set up a rotating schedule so that there would be someone around to provide care and help for the two of them. I was reminded once again that it takes a village. Even now, as I'm recording this, a dear friend of hers has come in from out of state to spend a few days looking after my mom and my dad so that my sister and I can have a short break from caring and from, having to take off work in order to provide care for them. I am reminded it takes a village. And then there was our trunk or treat event that our church hosted on Sunday afternoon. In a partnership with the Ankeny Community Network and Mount Zion Church, there was a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things that had to be done in preparation for the event. And in the midst of trying to plan the best that we could, in steps some of our congregants. There was Jen, who knew that I was also dealing with my mom's surgery and looking after my boys, and she took the reins and helped make sure that we had proper signage for the event, had some activities as well. There was Stephanie, who came up with incredible crafts for the families that they could do together after they did their trunk-or-treating rounds, and helped run the crafts to ensure that the families had quality time together. There's the people that decorated their trunks for the trunk-or-treat. We had an incredible showing of trunks that allowed for a safe and welcoming space for families to trick-or-treat together. We also had an opportunity to support our local educators with a donation. There were the people of our church who donated piles and piles of candy, so much so that we had so much extra candy by the time the event was over. No one ran out of candy, and every child walking away had full weighty sacks of treats that they could take home with them. There's Michael, my best friend and the best man at my wedding, who jumped in when I asked for help, that he would come to the event just to keep an eye on the boys so that I could both host a trunk and hand out candy as well as be on call if, something were to happen or if I needed to make adjustments or help run the event. Not having to worry about the boys wandering off or where they were at was a huge weight off of my shoulders and allowed me to focus on the event and try to make it as successful as possible. Or there's Dan and Kathy, who are brand new to our community and are just freshly started attending worship with us, who jumped in without hesitation and volunteered to run and grab us more pizzas when we were starting to get low. They didn't even know where the pizza shop was. They're still new to the area, but they didn't hesitate for a moment to jump in and help out. Truly, it takes a village. I guess all of this is just to say, this past week, I was reminded firsthand that the village is still very much alive and well in our world. And yes, sometimes we might struggle to see it or even be aware of it, but when it matters to us the most, people around us step up, and they turn up to help without a second thought. And yes, while I do think that we have struggled with increasing isolation and division in our country and in our world, I think it is important for us to acknowledge and hold up the other side of the spectrum as well. In the presence of the village, we see the best that humanity has to offer, that we have to offer one another as we come together to support each other in times of need. The village is still there. We just have to look for it. It might be easier to see the bad things, to see the isolation that has become so prevalent in our society today. But if we just choose to focus on the caretakers, the helpers, right? The people that step up in times of need, we will see firsthand that there is good at work in our world. That good people are out there that the village is alive. So, my friends, I invite us to continue to be the village that we were created to be. May we continue to support one another in times of hardship and difficulty. And may we ultimately work toward becoming a global village, where every person is a member, where all of us can take care of one another. So until next time, be well, my friends. Amen. Thanks once again for listening. If you want to learn more about Ankeny UCC, go to ankenyucc.org. And if you want to write in a show suggestion or have any comments, you can send those emails to clergycornerpodcast@gmail.com.